Culpepper to the show. How you doing, Chuck?
All right, how you guys doing? Can you hear me?
Doing good.
Hey,
Welcome to the show,
first time
Chuck.
on video.
By the way, that 12-10 memory was spot on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Right down to the Harbaugh of it.
Hey, I got that memory of games pretty well down. So
Yeah.
appreciate that. So
That was
so
ahead,
Chuck,
Anthony.
let's get some of your initial thoughts here after week one.
Oh, doesn't anybody I get really, really tired of thinking about which conferences are going to expand and whom they're going to poach from other places. And that's like business section talk. And it was all summer long, and obviously USC and UCLA fueled it. So to get to a weekend that had the nutty batch of games that this one had felt to me like some sort of, I don't know, potion or some sort of cure for all the business talk, because it was an astonishing weekend of games. And college football sometimes will have those weekends that are kind of formulaic and mundane, and then they'll have
Like this
weekends.
upcoming week, besides Alabama, Texas.
Right. But I mean, when a lot of times when you look at a week ahead of time as Monday, it ends up being really wild. So last weekend was really wild.
Yes, it was.
Just things you can't explain, and things that go on that just are nuttier than any other sport. And that's what I love about it the most.
Now, the one
I mean, I think one of the biggest things about this weekend, I think, was the way Georgia just completely manhandled
that question.
Oregon, especially considering that the former defensive coordinator of Georgia is now the head coach of Oregon. And Georgia, I mean, I know the game was in Atlanta, but that's a neutral field.
That was a blowout.
Seeing that 46-point blowout, I mean, they probably needed new jerseys at halftime with Oregon. They probably need an additional jersey change right now. I thought that was probably the most dominating performance of the weekend, and Jake Fromm just looked like he didn't miss a beat at all.
Well, we all thought that when the NFL came after their defensive players as they did, what was it, 5 in the first round?
Yes.
It's absurd. How could that even be true? So everybody kind of expected, let's see how this goes. They won the title. It's hard to keep it going after you win a title. Maybe you get kind of too happy with it or whatever. And obviously Kirby Smart studied under Nick Saban, so he's not going to be into that too happy kind of deal. But this was just absolutely just so impressive. And, the passing 25 out of 31, is just not the things we expect from them so much sometimes. And
I actually took the over on that player prop for Georgia quarterback. So you should be happy for doing that for anybody that took the over for that.
Yeah, it's but then I have to say that just down the road, I-20 in Tuscaloosa, Utah State went into Alabama, and that's a good program. Utah State, they've done some things in recent years. They won some bowl games and so on. It's good. And for them to lose 55-0 with the first downs at 30-7 and the total yards 559 to 135. I just wrote it down. I had to look at it. But Bryce Young rushing 5 times for 100 yards. I have to say that to me, the weekend felt like that in Los Angeles in January, I'm going to see Alabama and Georgia again. I know that's too fast, but it has that sense to it.
Right. Now, there was a game I did watch that was the Notre Dame and Ohio State. Now, I figured Ohio State was going to win that game. No question about that. But it was a matter of what was CJ Stroud's performance was. And I felt like, you know what? I took the under on that one. I won that one. So I got that prediction right. But I just felt like Ohio State's offense wasn't like it was last year.
That's the game I attended, and that was true. And that felt like a very weird several hours going on. We wandered all the way late into the third quarter with Notre Dame still ahead 10-7. And it's one of those deals where, that was Ohio State's was the number one offense in the country last year in yards per play and in total offense per game, And so to watch it kind of get defused like that, I was thinking, I know this guy, Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator now elevated to head coach, 36 is like really, really impressive, hugely impressive, or he wouldn't have gotten that job at 36. But I'm sitting there thinking, I know this guy's got a great football mind, but is it even more spectacular than we thought, which would be off the chart. So
right.
Let me ask
this
this question about that game on Saturday. So Ohio State did something to Notre Dame that only Clemson has done twice to Notre Dame in the last 6 years, is hold them to 10 points or under and under 260 yards of total offense. That's what Ohio State did to Notre Dame on Saturday. So they got a new defensive coordinator in the offseason from Oklahoma State, where he revamped the defense at Oklahoma State last year and improved it tenfold, I guess you could say. So with him coming in and changing the system, because Ohio State's coordinators, they were in a real mess last year. With Luke, after they lost Schiano and that crew last year. I mean, Kerry McCombs just never took over last year, and it was a complete mess. So is it more the players, or do you think it's the system? Because, I mean, we did lose some talent. I mean, Cam Brown looks like he might be the new DB of DBU, allegedly. I guess you can argue that with LSU. But can we touch a little bit about that on the Ohio State front? I mean, how much of it was more, do you think, schematics and scheme? And how much do you think of it was all of the 4- and 5-star talent coming back? I mean, were they overtly impressive besides having 12 men on the field on 3rd and goal, which the referees didn't catch? But besides that, can we talk a little bit maybe about the schematics here?
I thought they looked like different people in a way, even the ones who were back from last year. I thought they tackled really well, and I thought they had a confidence about them that, I went to the Oregon game last year and the Michigan game where they got run over both times, giving up, more than 250 rushing yards each time. These were like manhandlings, really. They lost both. And I just thought they were, scheme-wise, supposedly it's much more attack-oriented, this new, in the U.S., $2 million a year will get you a good defensive coordinator. So that's what they did. And I'm always wary of giving too much credit to coaches because I think it's players always. But sometimes when there's a change in philosophy and so on, the players really can sort of demonstrate what they're about. And of course, we also have to factor into that a first-time starting quarterback, his first ever game. It's on the road. Their offense at times looked like it didn't have that much threat to offer. So that's in there too. But it was still, by any call, a really impressive performance by that defense. After a year in which it, worried the fans there to pieces last year.
So let's ask a quick question about Notre Dame. They started the season off 5th nationally. They dropped to 8th nationally. I mean, do you think that's pretty accurate considering they're on the road and lost? Or are they a little bit too young still of deserving that 8th ranking compared, seeing what they have left on the schedule? I mean, it looks pretty cool for Notre Dame. Maybe other game against USC and Clemson. I mean, right now, if I was to guess, they may not win that game against Clemson, but they probably have a good shot of winning that game against USC. I mean, I guess you could say, if you were to say right now, that maybe a pick 'em, just in terms of looking at Notre Dame maybe sneaking in into that 4th spot later on if they can run the gauntlet. I mean, is that kind of accurate maybe to say at this point that you think they can still contend for that 4th spot because they lost on the road to Ohio State and they didn't get blown out and it was early in the season?
I do. And there's two prongs to that. One is that I might have kept them at 5th. If you go into the horseshoe and you play like that and you're right there after 3 quarters, and I might have just kept them at 5th. I like rewarding teams for scheduling like that, so that's one thing. The other part of it is that this committee over the last, now it'll be 9 years, but over the last 8 years has shown much more deference to teams who schedule like that in the non-conference. They really, really weigh that in. They will elevate programs who have done that scheduling as opposed to somebody, and they will dock programs who've scheduled FCS or whatever or in their first 3 games in their non-conference games. So in that light, I do think it's plausible that they get into the playoff.
But they'll have to run the table because probably 2 losses won't be good enough to get in at this point, right? You would be thinking right now.
You're right. Independent.
Because my thinking is probably Georgia and Alabama won't play each other till SEC championship week, and maybe you got Texas A&M or some outlier in the SEC that could throw a wrench in that, but doubtful. Right. But maybe A&M, but I mean they didn't exactly play like world beaters against San Houston State over the weekend. Maybe they were just playing vanilla and just waiting to really show what they've got, especially after the world's greatest bought recruiting class allegedly ever. So I guess with Alabama and Georgia kind of cementing the whole 1-2 world legacy, Ohio State, Utah losing at Florida, which I don't think was a big shocker. I think Utah plays a lot better on the road with that. Now, a lot of people are going to say, I'm going to jump to the thriller of Sunday night here. I don't think Florida State is back. Yes, it was a nice win over LSU, but LSU, I feel, gave that game away with a lot of turnovers, and it was a welcoming party to Brian Kelly.
I could have covered that game.
And I'm actually shocked he didn't turn purple on the sidelines like he should.
He kept,
is that going to be a marriage that's going to last? Because, he's already got 1 star receiver that looks like he already wants to go to the transfer portal. The fake accent. Is this going to last, or did LSU just get themselves in a bigger mess and kind of maybe wishing Ed Orgeron never left?
His facial muscles were really impressive. I thought that they sort of held their form, during some of those plays. But I think you're exactly right. Anytime 2 blocked kicks, a field goal and an extra point, and 2 muffed punts, and you lose by 1, I'm happy. It's great for Florida State. The sport would love to have them back in prominence, but that game did not tell us that they're back in prominence because of the things that happened in it. And then to your question, I just think he's a terrific coach. I really do. I think he's
Mike Norvell you're talking about?
No, I'm talking Kelly now. Yeah. I just think Kelly is just way, way up there. I remember I called his quarterback from his Central Michigan days. This is 20 years ago.
I remember. Yeah, when he was a hot commodity at Central, I thought Michigan might have was going to maybe make a move because they were looking for a coach. And that was going on after the whole Rich Rod fiasco and that. So that's kind of stayed his tenure. I thought he was going to be a real possible candidate. And then Notre Dame came in because those Central Michigan teams had a lot of talent and did a lot of good work in those days. They were probably the best MAC team in the MAC during his coaching stay in terms of development, which, obviously later on, it always seems like one of those 2 Michigan teams, either Central or Western, always seems to be when one is higher, the other one's kind of lower. But that one coach always seems to move on to a dominant leading program later on for those reasons. So after this weekend, is the Pac-12 pretty much dead besides USC after this weekend in terms of the CFP after one weekend?
I think what we just said about Notre Dame, we could say the same thing about Utah. And I think if Utah runs from here, that they will be they can get into the playoff because they dared to schedule in the swamp at Gainesville, as opposed to losing a game that might have been more, they were kind of in the mix in recent years, with I'm trying to think of the season. I think it's 2019, with less of an impressive loss, so to speak, than that one. So I think Utah and USC. I think Oregon might be gone, but I think
I can see that happening.
Utah and USC.
I believe, is it this week or next week that USC and Oregon play in Utah? Because that game's going to have a lot of ramifications, I think, with the Pac-12. I mean, whoever wins that game is going to have a lot of say-so. I mean, that's a statement game for USC. I mean, if USC doesn't win at Utah, then everybody in that conference has pretty much got a loss.
Yeah.
I mean, does the national media just decide to shift everything, basically to the Mississippi River and east at this point? Because
that's kind of where we've gotten anyway. We kind of have lost that part of the country. They haven't been in a playoff since the 15-16 or the 16-17 season.
Wow.
It's been a long time. Yeah. Washington was the last one in there.
That was like they didn't even have an NFL football team over there back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, USC plays Stanford this Saturday. Just want to
that should be interesting. The following week is that USC at Utah game, I believe. Okay. I think playing at Utah is no easy task. Right. I mean, Michigan went in there in Harbaugh's first game and lost at Utah. Right. So hey, it's not an easy place to compete at. So
and how do we factor in the conference issue too into that game?
Exactly. So let's get to the Big 12 here a little bit. Quinn Ewers won the starting job, mullet and all, and has become the starting quarterback at Texas. And obviously they won this past weekend. And obviously Alabama won. And those two have a big game against each other on Saturday. And Steve Sarkisian is quoted as, this game's not going to make or break the program, but it's probably the biggest game in the program since he's become head coach, even more so than the Red River shootout against Oklahoma. What would be success for Texas, even if they lose? Just keeping it close, considering Sarkisian is kind of known as the king of 5-7.
I think if they might not even need to keep it close. It'll matter how it looks. The spread on this thing, I just looked at one of them, is 19.5, and that's just really something, And that yesterday I was at the Texas,
especially for Alabama scheduling a non-conference game actually that is not at a neutral site,
right?
Because normally during the Saban era, minus a game at Penn State, I can't remember, which was already signed off on before he became head coach. I can't remember of a non-conference game Alabama has played under his reign that hasn't been at a neutral site stadium.
Great question. I
can't remember one.
Atlanta.
It's very hard. You probably have to do a lot of research.
Yeah, they're always in Atlanta or in Dallas at some
Dallas,
neutral site. You never see them play a non-conference game of a caliber opponent on the road. I mean, that Penn State game was an exception, but that was signed under an old athletic director and signed under the Shula regime, who he took over as head coach. So, I mean, that shows you how long ago that was signed, because that was when Penn State and Alabama had that home and home series maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, 19.5-point favorites on the road. I mean,
too much.
Texas, since the Mac Brown era, the late Mac Brown era, because, during the prime of the Mac Brown era, Texas was in Oklahoma, we're getting everybody, and then, Saban came in and things pretty much changed. The tide shifted from Texas and Oklahoma back more, I guess, to the SEC. I mean, if they get blown out Saturday, are we looking at another Charlie Strong here?
Oh boy.
Well, here's the thing. This malaise or whatever it is that has gone on for so long now, 12 years since they played Alabama in the Rose Bowl, that I think you always have to wonder that. And it's Charlie Strong and then Tom Herman. And I was convinced that Tom Herman was going to make that.
Hey, I'm with you there. I thought Tom Herman was going to be the guy that was going to turn that around, coming from Ohio State, going to Houston, turn that thing around lightning quick. And then, came into Texas, loaded with some Texas pedigree. I thought that was a slam dunk, and it didn't happen.
No.
So, I mean, it's Steve Sarkisian. He can get the quarterbacks. We know he can recruit quarterbacks. But there's more than just recruiting a quarterback. It's great that you can get Ewers and Arch Manning to come. But is that all he's going to be able to do? I mean, is he another David Cutcliffe to just do the quarterbacks but can't do anything else?
I think we've reached the point where the situation at Texas might not reflect the caliber of any of the coaches who go there. It might be that sort of situation where, I mean, you could do college dissertations on why it hasn't worked for so long. And it's amazing with the research, the resources, excuse me. But with the resources, it's astounding that it's gone on as long as it has. So now we're on the end of the Brown tenure, plus Strong, plus Herman, plus that 5-7 last year with Stark, where they lost.
Plus his record at USC, during the infamous drinking era at the end.
Yeah. So what I wonder about it is, and you may have the guess absolutely right about quarterbacks and Cutcliffe and so on. But what I wonder about it is if it fails again with this one after they ran Herman out, does it reflect on him so much, or does it reflect on some part of the program? Maybe too many cooks in the kitchen or something like that.
The athletic boosters, the athletic department, to some degree, because they got some influence to some degree. Why doesn't
it work? It should work. Why doesn't it work?
So, speaking of Texas and speaking of Oklahoma, especially now that they've lost Lincoln Riley, are they going to be able to compete in the SEC in a year and a half? I mean, is Texas going to become possibly Missouri, and is Oklahoma going to become the Florida of now, not the Florida of Urban Meyer? Because, I mean, it's a whole different landscape coming from the Big 12 to the big boys of the SEC. I mean, you're not playing Baylor, and you're not going to be able to afford to give up 35 points and win games when you scored 38, because these teams are going to be way better on both ends. I mean, are these teams going to be able to handle that jump, especially considering Oklahoma the last 5 years really hasn't been able to recruit defense, and Texas we've just talked about?
I think that Oklahoma-Florida comparison might be really, really good. I think that idea of, and it would be hard for Oklahoma fans to get used to, that idea of that they've been in 4 playoffs out of the 8, and that they're not going to be in 4 playoffs out of the first 8. Well, we're going to 12.
Well, now that they've expanded to 12, would they still have an opportunity to do that? Yeah. But not under the format of 4.
But under the format of 4, no way.
Exactly.
I
I was
would
going to
venture
say
that if
that.
it were still 4, they would make 1 out of 8 at most. Yeah. So
I mean,
Now, go ahead.
go ahead, Sean.
Okay. Now, let's say Texas and Oklahoma is going to leave, right? So since those two teams are going to leave in the Big 12, who you think is going to be the future of the Big 12? Which team you think like could be like the future of the Big 12, and do you think like it could be over for that conference?
no, I think it'll exist in a viable way. Probably the 5th best of the or the 4th best of the Power 5. It's going to add those new 4 teams. What is it? BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. And
I think UCF is going to benefit the most out of that move. I really do.
And I am so high on Baylor's coach, Dave Aranda. I just think this guy, and they're playing at BYU in probably the most interesting game of this weekend, I think.
Dave Aranda, to me, I was actually shocked that he was passed over for the LSU job. I think they messed up there because, Dave Aranda, when he was the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, he was a stud. I mean, he didn't have a lot of talent at Wisconsin defensively. I mean, I live in Wisconsin. I'm a Michigan, but I see enough Badgers football that it's toxic for me, and I got to deal with all of that stuff.
Right.
But he made that defense look great, and Jim Leonard should send him a big thank you for giving him that system and that coaching when he left to let Leonard jump up and take a lot of those dynamics that he's been able to keep within the system there. Even though last year maybe didn't reflect it because that defense last year at Wisconsin was below average for them. But so Dave Aranda went from Wisconsin, got paid boatloads of money to be the defensive coordinator at LSU, and LSU won a natty. Okay? I mean, they had the offensive talent, but the man transformed that. You got to remember that LSU team had talent, but not the system. And then they didn't have a quarterback till Joe Burrow. They can thank Ohio State for that. Right. And because, the two things LSU can always recruit, wide receivers and DBs. So, Dave Aranda transformed that, and then he left for Baylor, and then, things took a dump. And he went to Baylor, and then Ed Orgeron, left his wife, got a hot girlfriend, is now not coaching at LSU. And gotta love that TikTok pic. Right. And now you got Brian Kelly there, and that transition. I think it's gonna take a little time because I just don't know if they're gonna trust him I thought Dave Aranda was a shoo-in to get that LSU job, and he didn't. And he's at Baylor. I mean, to me, I think Baylor is well coached, and I'm actually shocked a bigger school hasn't come after Dave Aranda. I think he's one of the most underrated head coaches in America. And if Michigan ever decided to, Harbaugh retired or something, that guy would probably be near the top of my list for a head coach. I just think it's almost amazing what Baylor has done, even after the Art Briles scandal, that they didn't take as near of a fall as they probably should have. And I think that's a testament to the athletic department and Aranda. I mean, they went through a little bit of a downfall, but I mean, it could have been a lot worse in this era, in this transfer portal era. So, Chuck, your thoughts maybe on Baylor here a little bit?
Well, remember Matt Rule, too, who did a fantastic job there.
Yes, before he took the Carolina
Carolina. So I'm just so completely impressed with Aranda. And one thing, he's got a different cadence to him and a different way about him. Doesn't feel like a coach when you're in the room, in the press conference room with him, whatever. And I feel like that might make it where he's one of these guys who might just like where he is. And there's something about him that makes me think LSU might have been, that's a place when you're the head coach that's a different kind of job than it is even Michigan or that's a big time job can be really, really nutty. So I think if he sticks at Baylor, and I think he's a better bet to do that than a lot of guys who would be having this success. And then I think if that happens, Baylor in the Big 12, and then maybe nationally is going to be an interesting dynamic going on.
Let me ask you a question. That I guess is on the forefront. How much do you think administrations right now are affecting NIL? I'll give you an example. Michigan, okay, compared to a more open university to policies like Alabama or Georgia, maybe politically speaking to some degree. Obviously, Michigan now hired a more pro-sports president / chancellor and Santa Ono, who was Cincinnati's president and chancellor, and he was very pro-sports. He was very pro-sports compared to anti-sports compared to the previous presidents at Michigan.
Yeah.
How much of a factor do you think that's going to help Michigan in terms of NIL and recruiting now by finally getting a more vocal advocate for sports like Santa Ono and that's compared to previous more academia, not as friendly to sports presidents and your dealings with as long as you've been writing?
I think
and covering games and sports.
I think that's one aspect that actually hasn't changed in terms of if you have the supportive president, your sports are going to benefit. And I think the thing that has changed is that before, if you had a president who didn't really like sports, he or she might put a clamp on the boosters, who were giving the money in a way we didn't know about. So now I think if you have it like that, he or she might not like, the NIL to run wild with the place or whatever. That's just my perception there is that it can only help the sports to have a president who thinks it's important. And I think that's the same as it was. I really do. Yeah.
Now, which games are you going to be covering this weekend? Where are you going to this weekend? Which game?
Austin.
So you're going to Austin to the big walk down there this weekend.
That's a Fox game.
Yeah.
Big noon kickoff.
Yeah. Now, from what I've heard, Texas and Alabama both were not happy that this is going to be an 11 o'clock start because of the Fox TV contract.
Exactly.
With that,
it's just wrong. Yeah.
Because that game should be more of a prime time game, but because of the Fox TV contract with that is basically made that a muggy 11 o'clock game for this weekend.
Yeah.
With that, and there's no way that Fox was even willing to move it, which they probably should have tried to work out, I feel, without losing the game. But then you got to deal with the other networks not willing to agree to move on their time slots either.
Yeah.
With that. Do you know was there any conversations that you heard of trying to work with other networks to try to move that time slot, but keep it on Fox? Because you knew they weren't going to give that game up.
Nothing I've heard. I mean, you're right. That game belongs either at 3:30 or 7:30. I'm talking Eastern time now.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing I've heard. And I was at the Texas press media availability yesterday, and it never even came up. Subject of 11 a.m. never even came up. So, and your question has just reminded me that it never came up. I didn't even think about it later that day, even as I'm thinking I'm not sure if it came up with Saban yesterday. But when he met over in Tuscaloosa with the reporters. So yeah, it's funny how we've all gotten so used to something crazy like that as being routine.
I mean, how often do you see Alabama playing a prime game if you're playing like whatever cupcake that the SEC plays
Right.
in that week in November, that when they all play the cupcake teams,
Right.
it seems like tradition, the 1 week where they cupcake week is, that is an 11 o'clock game. But how often do you see Alabama play a prime opponent with that much exposure at 11 a.m. Central, 12 noon? Plus, I don't know what the weather is going to be down there, but I was in Austin in early August, and it was 106 degrees at the pool, and my feet felt like bacon was cooking when I was walking the 10 feet to the pool.
Are you talking Oscar Mayer bacon?
And Oscar Mayer, Jimmy Dean. I mean, you could hear the little pops going. So what's the anticipated weather going to be? Do you know, or have you seen that? And are the players going to be able to handle that for an 11 o'clock game this week, especially, in terms of hydration, if that heat is going to still be at those kind of levels?
Yeah, I've looked at it. It looks like a 93 or 94 kind of deal.
Ooh.
So the field level might be over 100 degrees because of all that heat coming down. How are they going to keep these players hydrated without cramps? Or do these teams have special techniques that, like drinking pickle juice allegedly helps? Anything else? No, seriously, pickle juice has a hydration factor, which helps actually. And drinking chocolate milk also helps also. So I don't know what these teams have, but I mean, will that play matter if it's a close game? I mean, chances are, if it goes what the odds makers are saying, 19 points. But I'm just saying, if it's closer, it could come down to that. But, is Texas better than they were last year?
Yes, I think so. Well, we don't know yet, because one of the themes, first of all, I'll say about the 94 degrees, high temperatures don't usually kick in until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So maybe it'll be 89, 90 when the game is played.
Okay.
But Texas last year looked good in its first game too, just like it did this year. And then went to Arkansas the second game, got just clobbered, and then went 4-1 and then lost 6 in a row. So that was part of the talk yesterday at their session was, we're kind of right back where we were with them, and we don't know how good they are, and we don't really have any idea. So I think it's a good question. I think the quarterback, Quinn Ewers, who went to Ohio State and came back to there, and
Xavier Worthy, who's a stud.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a monster game. The defense is going to have to pull some miracles to keep this thing close.
I think one thing that might help is it's so unusual for them to be a 19-point underdog at home, especially. I think one of the things that hurts them through the years, no matter who's playing for them, is this sort of sense of entitlement, of being Texas, of being, what was it a few years ago? One of their players was talking about Baylor as still their little brother. I mean, come on. That's the kind of thing that I wonder if it hurts them to some degree. And that won't be the case this week. So I kind of do expect that they might play better than we all expect because of that.
Now, where can my listeners find you on social media, Chuck?
Twitter, it's at Chuck Culpepper in the numeral 1. Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Chuck. It was a pleasure having you on. It's 30 minutes long, but it was a great 30 minutes. I appreciate it. Me and you.
I'd definitely love to have you back on again, Chuck. This is really
exactly.
good to take time.
Thanks to you both. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Think about November. I'm thinking about November.
Well, you know where I'll be in November? Qatar. So.
Oh, you're going to the World Cup?
If you want to talk the round ball, I'll be available in November.
I can talk round ball all day with you. I love soccer, but my team did not make the World Cup.
Italy?
Yep. I'm a huge Italy fan. They did not make, so now I'm rooting for Canada.
It's not a complete World Cup without Italy, ever.
Let me tell you, I was ecstatic, and I probably overspent on Italy gear in terms of Puma purchases after we won Euro 2021.
Hey.
And
after
losing to North Macedonia, I was depressed
He was
in a
crushed.
coma for a couple weeks. So I'm still
Oh,
recovering right now. The only good thing is that the women's team made the World Cup. The Italian women's team made the World Cup today in the Women's World Cup. So, hey, at least somebody actually won their group against Switzerland. Because Switzerland won in women's soccer 15-0 today against Moldova. But that's a whole nother story. I follow way too much sports, Chuck, but I do love soccer. So we should definitely bring you in for the World Cup when we get closer to that, because I'm a soccer hound. We can talk Serie A, EPL, transfer windows. We can talk about that all day along with college football.
Okay.
Great. We look forward to have you in November. I'm planning on doing that.
From the Middle East, maybe. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you both so much.
Hey, there's no alcohol in the beer out there, from what I heard. So
in the hotels, yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, at least you get some type of booze out there.
Right.
You may need it if the USA has a rough time in that group. But hey, Chuck, thanks a lot for having us, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
Be well, and thank you so much. Thank you.
All right,
You're
thanks,
very
Chuck.
welcome. All right. Yeah, I didn't even know that. You can't even have alcohol, well, in the Middle East. Wow.
Well, it's the Middle East, and you think for a FIFA,